Hi everybody, I'm Michelle Duval, the director of the Mindful Center. Welcome to Life on Mindfulness. In today's session, I'm going to be covering a really important aspect of both mindfulness and meditative practice in general. And it has to do with how we relate to our thoughts, how we relate to thinking. For most people trying to cultivate a mindfulness and or a meditative practice, this thing called thinking creates a really big obstacle, and it has to do primarily with how we typically relate to our thoughts. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, teach a little bit on that, and then I'm going to teach you a really effective practice. It's so simple and yet hugely effective for beginning to help us to change our relationship to our thoughts in a really positive and beneficial way. Okay? So let's get started. So typically the way that most human beings relate to their thoughts is we believe them. We tend to think they're true. Just because we have a thought, we tend to think it's true. But I don't know about you. I personally have had probably 10 trillion thoughts throughout the course of my lifetime that turned out to be absolutely and positively not true. One time years ago, I got really mad at my sister and I had the thought, oh, I just want to kill her. But no part of me actually wanted to kill her. It was a completely untrue thought. And yet how most of us live our lives is the thoughts kind of magically appear on the level of mind and we move right into belief of them. So now, what exactly is mindfulness? Mindfulness is intentional awareness. It's developing the capacity through some practice of mindfulness meditation. We develop the capacity to become intentionally aware or mindful of certain phenomena in our lives. And one of the main phenomena in our lives that we can practice becoming more aware of is this phenomenon of thinking, of thought, and how we typically relate to our thoughts is just because we have a thought, we tend to think it's true, and then how that belief of our thoughts then begin to inform our behavior. Let me give you a real meditative specific type of example, and then I'll share with you this brilliant little practice that can help just at least begin to soften our relationship with our thoughts a little bit. Let's say you've decided to meditate and you sit down, you got all your stuff ready, you got a cup of iced tea to keep you lubricated, you got your favorite meditation queued up on the iPod, and now you sit down, you press play on the guided meditation, and for the first couple of minutes, you're doing pretty good. You're really getting into things, you're getting into the flow of things. And then as happens to all of us, right, the mind will start to generate thoughts that aren't necessarily of our choosing. It'll just start to think about stuff. And a real common thought to have while we're meditating is a thought of judgment about how our meditation itself is going. So many times, so many people report that they'll sit down and try to meditate and then they think it's not going so well, they're having a really hard time focusing, the mind is scattered all over the place. But what's actually happening is they're sitting down to practice meditation, and then their mind is just releasing or creating these type of thoughts. For example, I'm sitting here doing a breathing meditation. I don't think this meditation is going so well. I'm having a really hard time focusing. I can't stop thinking about work. Try to come back to the breath. I don't know, I feel really antsy in my body. I'm not really feeling any sense of peace or release like I did yesterday when I meditated. Come back to the breath. Maybe I should just kind of give up on this meditation. It just isn't going so well. It's been really hard for me. I have zero mental focus. Maybe I should just go take a bath or something else or whatever it is. These are real typical types of kind of judgmental type of thinking that can occur so easily and for most people when we develop our meditation practice. And let's take a look at the phenomenon. All that is happening is your mind is creating thoughts, and then you are moving directly into belief of those thoughts. But here's another aspect of practice that throughout the course of my career, even people who are 10-year meditators need to be reminded of this every once in a while, is those thoughts of, I can't meditate today, I have no mental focus, my mind is too busy. Those are just thoughts. That's all they are, just thoughts. We have such deep familiarity with believing our thoughts that we forget that if we just allow the thought to arise in the mind and then let it move on through without necessarily attaching to the thought or moving directly into belief of the thought, the amount of impact that thought has on us, and in this instance has on our practice, begins to be directly depleted. So a practice of mental noting is when we shift our attention or our awareness from, say, the feeling of the breath, if you're doing a breathing meditation, or the feeling of the body, if you're doing a body scan meditation, or even from the sound of the voice and what the instructions are telling you to do if you're currently listening to a guided meditation. You shift your awareness from those objects or focal points for your mind to the thoughts and the process of thinking itself. Or in other words, you practice observing and noting the thinking process within the scope of your awareness. So when I just said and used the phrase, oh, it's just a thought, that is a form of mental noting. That can be a practice of mental noting. And over my 18 plus years of teaching, I will tell you straight up, that is one of the biggest takeaways that so many people take from my classes, is this awareness, this realization that, oh my gosh, that is just a thought. The thought of how stupid you are because of what you said in the last meeting earlier today is just a thought. The thought of, I can never catch up, I have so much to do, I'm just always behind, oh my God, I can't get control of my life. Those are just thoughts. They're just thoughts. And this ability to note them and notice them for that which they are begins to detangle our relationship to the thoughts. Meaning we go from just believing all those thoughts to beginning to identify with the awareness, noticing them for that which they are, which are just thoughts, with no more power over us than we can choose to give them. So one form of practicing mental noting is where you simply practice every single thought that you notice surfacing on the level of mind. You practice noting. It's just a thought. You cannot meditate today. Oh, it's just a thought. It's really hot in here. It's just a thought. And you actually do that as a part of your meditative practice. What this takes us immediately out of is resisting or fighting the thoughts, right? The biggest mistake that people make about meditation is thinking that we're supposed to be emptying the mind or not having thoughts or not thinking about stuff. But as we discover very quickly in our practice, that's virtually impossible to do. And actually, true mindfulness and true mindfulness meditation can include thought. And it's included in just the way that I'm describing. When we practice bringing our mindfulness, our intentional awareness to the thoughts themselves and practicing recognizing them for that which they are, which is just a thought. And in so doing, over some time, with some time and consistency and practice, we begin to change our relationship to those thoughts. Let me give you a simple example from my own life. Impatience is a big thing that's a part of my family. My dad was always type A. We'd go on family vacations. He'd have all of us kids loaded up into the car at like 5 a.m. So he was like, go, 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 right? And I kind of inherited that a little bit. I picked up a lot of that sense of being impatient in my own life. And before my practice of mindfulness, I used to get really impatient anytime I'd have to wait in lines, like at the grocery store, at the bank. I'd sit there and just think about the line and how long it was taking. This is taking forever. Why don't they just open up more checkers? Why don't they bring on more clerks? Oh my gosh, you knew it was your turn next. Why didn't you have your credit card ready? And I would just sit there and believe all my thoughts. I generate all these thoughts. And I would just stand there, and just believe all of those thoughts. And a thought cannot take place without a physiological response. So all of those thoughts would begin to trigger a whole cascade of physiological changes in my body. The changes were on par with what the experience of impatience feels like in the body. It would start to make my heart beat a little bit faster. I'd get hot. I'd just get like this all over body kind of annoyance feeling. Those are the physiological phenomenon that's being triggered by me not only having these thoughts, but then believing them. And in the belief, creating more of similar thoughts, which just kind of exacerbated or more deeply created my experience of being impatient. Now, through my mindfulness practice, when I get in lines, I wish I could say those thoughts of impatience didn't surface anymore after an 18-year practice, but they do. But there's a big difference to them now. When they surface and I notice myself thinking, oh my gosh, this line is taking forever. Why didn't she have her credit card out? I simply practice not believing those thoughts. I notice them for that which they are. Look at that. It's another thought, like I've had 17 trillion times before, of how things aren't going fast enough as I would like them to be going, right? Thought of judgment. I notice it, I note the thought, and then it's so much easier to just not be bothered or not have my physical experience be tempered by those thinking, by that thinking. Just a thought. Let it surface on the level of the mind, and then I let it move on through. Totally changing my experience of being in grocery stores through the changing of my relationship to those thoughts. Whereas in the past I used to believe them as true. Yeah, this line really is taking forever. Now my relationship to those thoughts it's just a thought. Big difference. Mental knowing is an incredibly powerful yet simple tool that we can use as meditators to bring greater awareness to what our minds are full of, which is yet another definition of mindfulness. Being able to bring greater awareness to what our minds are full of. And when we notice what our minds are full of is not bringing us any benefit, we can notice it just a thought and allow it to move on through just as easily as it surfaced in the first place. Okay, give it a try. I hope so much that was of benefit to you. See you next month in Life on Mindfulness.